The ropes burned my wrists as if they were alive, tightening with each involuntary movement. The cold metal around my ankles seemed to mock me, reminding me that there was no chance of escape. Ahead of me, two military pickup trucks, painted that lifeless green, were positioned to drive off in opposite directions. Their engines coughed up dark smoke that mingled with the icy wind of that February morning. My name is Sangwai. I am 34 years old, and I am the pastor of a small church hidden in Jinan province, in the heart of China. And now I was there, exposed on a field of hardened earth, bound like an animal, about to be torn apart before nearly 300 people who were forced to watch. The officer in charge walked around me, like a predator who already knows his prey doesn't have the strength to run. Each of his steps made the stones creak. He stopped so close that I could smell the strong odor of tobacco in his breath. "Last chance, Shang," he said, in a firm but almost weary voice. "Give up this Jesus. Sign. Go home. Watch your children grow up." I searched through the crowd and found my wife. Mine was holding our children close to her chest, trying to cover their eyes, but unable to. My oldest son, 7 years old, looked at me with a mixture of fear and disbelief. It pierced my soul. I felt tears welling up, but my mouth was already moving before I could think. "Only Jesus is Lord." The officer turned his face and spat on the ground. He made a gesture with his hand. I heard the truck doors slamming shut, the engines roaring louder. My heart felt like it was going to burst from my chest. "Jesus, receive my spirit," I whispered. But before I explain what happened next, I need to take you back 2 weeks. It was an ordinary night for us, the kind of night that becomes precious, and serving Christ means going into hiding. Our meeting was in the basement of Brother Chen's house, the same place where we had met for almost 3 years. The space was too small for 27 people, but no one complained. That day, someone new showed up. A young man named Liu, recommended by a brother from another city. He seemed restless, fidgeting with his hands all the time, but we thought it was just the natural nervousness of someone attending an underground church for the first time. We only discovered later that Liu had been arrested a month earlier. He was tortured for days. When they threatened his family, he gave in. The proposal was simple and cruel. Infiltrate our ranks, get names, addresses, escape route. In exchange, his wife and son would be spared. And he accepted. As we prayed holding hands that night, he memorized every face, every voice, every detail. And we, unknowingly, embraced the one who had already signed our death warrant. 3 days later, the early morning was shattered by the sound of splintering wood. They didn't knock, they broke in. It was 3:47 a.m. on February 15, 2019. Flashlights in our faces, shouts of command, boots invading the house as if they wanted to crush us. One of them hit me in the stomach with the butt of a rifle. I lost my breath instantly. The children started crying, frightened by the noise and the commotion. I was dragged out while my wife screamed my name. I remember my youngest son's voice, hoarse from crying. "Daddy! Daddy!" They threw me into the back of a pickup truck and put a bag over my head. There were 3 more brothers inside, all wounded, all trembling. The journey seemed endless. When they took the bag off, I was inside a military compound I had never seen before. The place they took me to was exactly as rumored, a hole where Christians went in and simply disappeared. The next 4 days were a journey through the depths of human suffering. There was no set time for anything. The interrogations could begin the moment I managed to fall asleep. They woke me with buckets of ice water and always returned to the same questions: name, addresses, meetings. Each of my silences was accompanied by stronger blows. I lost 2 teeth. I felt a rib crack. My left eye swelled so much that it turned into a purple shadow on my face. But none of that compared to the terror that gripped me when they brought photos of my family. They knew exactly where to tread. They showed my wife leaving the house, my son walking to school, my daughter going down the slide at the park. "It would be sad if something happened to them," the interrogator would say, smiling with that coldness that only someone who has lost their humanity can possess. I wanted to be strong, but the truth is that doubts began to devour me from the inside. Is it worth it? What if my faith puts my children in danger? It was in the early hours of the fourth day that something changed. I don't mean I saw lights or figures. I didn't see anything with my eyes. He was lying on the damp floor of the cell, trembling uncontrollably, when a presence filled the room. It wasn't just any feeling. It was as if someone had placed a warm blanket over my soul. And then I heard, not with my ears, but with my heart, "I have never left you, and I will not leave you now. Do not fear." I burst into tears, but for the first time in days, they weren't tears of despair. It was like breathing again after almost drowning. At that moment, I understood that my life was not in their hands, but in the Creator's. The next day, they came to get me. They dragged me outside to a large dirt courtyard. Prisoners and their families were lined up as if for a macabre ceremony. The officer announced in a firm, proud voice, "Today you will all see the fate of those who defy the party. Sang Wai, guilty of illegal religious activities. His punishment will be public and definitive." They brought two vans and positioned them meters apart, facing each other. They threw me to the ground and began to tie me up in a way that made my body protest with every inch of pain. It was an impossible position. I looked to the sky, trying to find any sign of hope. And then, among the people forced to watch, I found my family. Mine was trembling, holding the children, trying to protect them from what was about to happen. That's when the van's engines began to roar. But for you to understand how I got to this point, I need to go back 17 years. I didn't grow up in a Christian home. In fact, faith was almost a forbidden joke. My father was a dedicated party militant. At home, religion was treated as dangerous illusion, opium to control weak people, as he put it. We lived in Shengo, the capital of Jinan. My family had privileges because of my father's position, which also meant we had to behave perfectly. I grew up thinking God was a figment of the imagination, and that only naive people believed in him. Everything changed when I turned 19. I was studying engineering at university, and that's where I met Liang. He didn't attract attention, quiet, reserved, but there was something about him that no one could ignore: peace. While we complained about the government, the food, the exams, he seemed to have an anchor in his chest. One day, without saying much, he called me to his dorm room. He closed the door, lifted the mattress, and took out an old book with worn edges. "It's a Bible," he said. "I've been reading it in secret for 2 years." My first impulse was to recoil, as if I were facing something dangerous, but there was a restless curiosity within me. He simply said, "Read it. Draw your own conclusions. You don't have to believe me." That night, I waited for my roommate to fall asleep and opened the book under the yellowish light of my lamp. I began with the Gospel of John. The words seemed strange, almost poetic, laden with a weight I didn't understand. But it was when I reached chapter 3, verse 16, that something inside me dissolved. "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life." I couldn't explain it, but I felt like a door had been opened inside me. When I read those words, "God loved the world," something inside me shook. I had spent my whole life hearing that the world loved no one, that the only possible love was for the state. The individual was disposable. The collective machine was what mattered. But there, in that seemingly simple phrase, was a revolution. Every life mattered, including mine. That broke me down. I cried silently like I had never cried before. In the following weeks, I secretly met with Liang and a small group of students who shared the same faith. There were no fireworks in my conversion. It was silent, profound, and certain. I simply knew Jesus was real, and I wanted to give my life to him. On the day of my baptism, we went to a river at dawn. The water was so cold it took my breath away. But when I resurfaced, I felt as if I were breathing for the first time. That day marked the beginning of my new life. 3 months later, my father found out. He found my hidden Bible and burned it in front of me, as if he were purifying the house of a plague. "If you continue with this madness, you will no longer be my son," he said. My mother cried. My sister stared at me as if I were someone she no longer recognized. Their rejection pierced me like a blade. I loved them deeply, But something greater had found me, the truth. I left home that same night, with only a backpack on my back. Liang welcomed me without asking any question. For months, we lived off odd jobs and temporary work. At night, we would meet with other Christians in hiding, sharing bread, prayers, and hope. There I understood what it means to have a spiritual family. Without realizing it, God was shaping my heart for something greater. When I turned 23, I was invited to serve in a network of house churches in Inan. I started with the basics, cleaning the meeting place, distributing Bible, visiting sick members. As time passed, the leaders came to trust me more. They taught me how to care for people, how to disciple, how to preach. I wasn't seeking a position. It simply came as I remained faithful to what God placed before me. At 26, I met Milan at one of those secret meetings. She possessed a gentle beauty, but what struck me most was her unwavering faith, even after being rejected by her own family. We married in a simple ceremony, with 10 people seated around an improvised table. We had almost nothing. We lived in a tiny apartment. We worked for meager wages, but we were happy. We had God, we had each other, and we had a community that supported us. When our first child was born, I felt something profound awaken within me. Looking at that fragile baby in my arms, I thought, I want him to grow up in a place where he can worship God without fear. I knew that world didn't yet exist around us, but I was willing to do whatever it took to bring that day closer to reality. In 2015, I was already among the leading figures in our province's house church network, not because I sought prominence, but because many were imprisoned, others fled, and I simply remained. Our church met in the basement of Brother Chen's house, a 60-year-old man with a giant heart. His residence was hidden among rice paddies, which gave us some security. The meetings were on Sunday, always at 11 p.m. We arrived slowly, one at a time. Every 10 minutes, someone else came down the stairs to that damp basement, smelling of wet earth. There weren't enough chairs for everyone. Many sat on the floor. We sang softly, almost whispering, but the presence of God seemed to fill every inch of that cramped space. And when we prayed, when we shed our tears there, hidden from the world, it was impossible to deny. The Holy Spirit was alive among us. I clearly remember the night Sister Hang first appeared. She was about 45 years old, her face too thin, her hands always trembling. 20 years of battling opium addiction had left deep scars on her. Her husband had given up on her. Her children no longer answered her calls. She was broken, empty. At that meeting, I preached about God's love, not the love that demands perfection, but the love that reaches precisely those who have lost everything. In the end, Sister Hang simply collapsed. She fell to her knees and began to cry out in such raw pain that it made us all shudder. We surrounded her and prayed for hours, asking God to do what no human force could do. And that night, something supernatural happened. The chains of addiction broke. She never touched opium again. Never again. Stories like these began to emerge more frequently. People restored, marriages rebuilt, families reunited. In just 2 years, our congregation had grown from 12 to 80 people. The growth was so rapid that we had to divide ourselves into 4 small groups to avoid drawing attention. But the more light there was among us, the more shadow began to move around us. The first threats were almost whispered, anonymous notes saying they knew what we were doing, phone calls in the middle of the night, strange figures circulating in the neighborhood. Then came the disappearance. Brother Juan was taken away in the early morning, 3 months without news. When he returned, he was unrecognizable, 15 kilos lighter, his body marked by burns, and his soul carrying the weight of shame. He had signed a renouncement of his faith to survive. Each arrest triggered waves of fear among us. Some families decided to leave. Others moved far away. The atmosphere was one of constant tension. I also received warnings. 3 times, police stopped me in the street for impromptu interrogation. One time, I was detained for 6 hours. The questions were always the same. Who was in charge? Where we met? Who participated? I never answered. I just repeated, we must obey God rather than men. We lived in a permanent state of surveillance. My children felt it. One night, my oldest asked me, Dad, why do people hate us? It was like being punched in the chest. But even with all the fear, we continued. Each week brought someone new. Each month we witnessed more transformation. We knew we couldn't let terror paralyze what God was doing among us. Then came August 2018, when everything worsened. The government launched a major offensive. Hundreds of Christians were arrested in a matter of days. Our meetings became almost impossible. We had to reinvent ourselves. We formed groups of no more than 5 people. We changed locations for every meeting. We started using codes to communicate. It was in this context that Liu appeared. He had been recommended by someone extremely trustworthy. He seemed sincere, had a humble demeanor, and spoke emotionally about how he had found faith. We welcomed him. We all believed in him. What we didn't know was that Liu had been broken by torture. They offered him a perverse deal: infiltrate our ranks and pass on information in exchange for his family's safety. For 3 weeks, he attended every meeting, prayed with us, took notes, asked questions. He seemed like someone thirsting for God, but in reality, he was memorizing the faces he would betray. On the evening of February 12, 2019, we gathered for a special celebration, Sister Chen's birthday. There were 27 of us there, singing, praying, sharing simple food and genuine joy. It was one of those gatherings where you feel God is so close, you can almost touch him. And Liu was there in the midst of it all, watching every detail. 3 days later, chaos erupted. The door was ripped open as if it were made of paper. The noise jolted me awake in a fraction of a second. Before I could understand what was happening, the room filled with bright lights and shouting voices. "On the floor! Everyone on the floor!" Panic took hold. Mylin clung to me with desperate strength. I will never forget the fear etched in her eyes. In the next room, I heard our children crying. 3 policemen burst in like a storm. Bright lights, shouts, the smell of dust kicked up from the floor. Their flashlights were more blinding than illuminating. One of them came straight at me, grabbed my neck, and threw me to the ground with such force that my face hit the tile, the metallic taste of blood filling my mouth. As they handcuffed me, I heard someone shout my name, Mylin, desperate, trying to understand what was happening. I barely had time to look at her before they ripped me from the ground. My 7-year-old son ran to me, sobbing, "Daddy, don't go." Before he could touch me, a policeman pushed him as if he were shooing away a dog. He fell to the ground, and his crying turned into a despair that pierced my chest like a knife. Mylin ran to hug him, also trying to reach me with her gaze. The children stared at me in terror, their eyes silently asking what would happen to us. I didn't have a chance to answer. They put a bag over my head, and everything went dark. They pushed me down the stairs like I was a sack of trash. Outside, they forcibly lifted me and threw me into a van. I realized I wasn't alone when I heard heavy breathing beside me. An elderly voice whispered a short prayer. It was Brother Chen. Before he could finish, a guard shouted, "Silence! Whoever speaks forfeits even the right to think." The van sped off. Every turn threw us against the metal walls. It felt like an endless ride. When they finally ripped the bag off my head, my eyes burned with the light as I saw the place where we had been taken. A military complex surrounded by barbed wire, watchtowers, and armed soldiers. One of those places people talked about quietly, and from which no one ever returned. I was dragged into the courtyard. Gravel dug into my bare feet, tearing at the skin. I left a trail of blood along the way. The cell where they put me was smaller than a regular bathroom. No window, no sense of time, just a light in the hallway, flickering erratically, disrupting any sense of time. In the corner, a hole in the ground that served as a latrine. The smell was suffocating. I lay there, handcuffed, not knowing if hours or days were passing. Without warning, the first interrogation began. They pulled me out of the cell and took me to a room with stained white tiles. In the center, a metal chair. An industrial light fixture hanging from the ceiling shone directly into my eyes. I sat down, and the light burned my vision. A policeman entered slowly. He was the type of man who exuded cold authority. He placed a thick folder on the table and began to read aloud. Sang Wai, 32 years old, married, 2 children, leader of clandestine religious activities for 7 years. He raised his eyes, dry as stone. We have everything: names, addresses, dates. And do you know where it came from? He patted the folder. From one of yours. My stomach tightened. Do you want to know who? He continued, with a cruel smile. Liu, the young man you took in as a brother. The information hit me like a punch. My chest burned. He told us everything, the officer continued, when we explained what would happen to his family. Oh, he talked like a canary. It was like taking a double blow. Pain for the betrayal and compassion for his suffering. He had been tortured. He had a family. He was afraid. I'm not going to name names, I replied. My voice faltered, but the words came out. The policeman let out an exaggerated sigh, as if he were tired of playing around. He nodded to the guard next to him. I received a punch to the kidneys that took my breath away. My body doubled over on its own, trying to escape the pain. We can continue like this for a long time, Sangwai, said the officer, adjusting his uniform. And believe me, it can get much worse. And it stayed that way. The following days were an endless sequence of blows, pulls, screams, and humiliation. But worse than the violence was when they brought the photos, new photos, taken days before, of Milan at the market, of my son going to school, of my daughter playing. The officer picked up a photo of her smiling and said, "It would be a shame if something happened to such a fragile child." This destroyed me. I could endure physical pain, but the thought that my family could be hurt because of me crushed me. That's when thoughts began to haunt me. What if I gave in? What if I only gave one name? Does God really expect me to put my family at risk? On the fourth day, I finally reached my limit. They left me handcuffed in such a painful position that my muscles trembled uncontrollably. The sun hadn't yet fully broken the horizon, but enough to cast long shadows on the gravel patio. The morning wind cut into my skin as I felt every fiber of those ropes digging deeper into my arms. The chains fastened to my ankles were so tight, my feet began to tingle. It was as if every part of my body was on the verge of breaking, because that's exactly what they planned to do. While the guards finished tying the last knots, the officer walked toward me with measured steps, as if he were about to conduct a carefully rehearsed performance. He held a clipboard and seemed pleased with himself. "Sangwai," he said, leaning close to my face, "you can end this now. Just admit your guilt. Just deny your faith. Just cooperate." My hands were trembling, but not from fear. It was the effect of the pain and poor circulation. Even so, I managed to look up and meet his eyes. "I cannot deny the one who saved me," I replied, my voice firmer than I had expected. A glint of irritation crossed his gaze, but it was quickly replaced by calculated coldness. He made a sign. The drivers climbed into the pickup trucks. It was then that I raised my head and searched for the faces that mattered most to me in this world. I saw my children first. My oldest son stared at me without blinking, his eyes wide, filled with a terror that no human being should ever experience, least of all a child. His small hand gripped his mother's clothes tightly, as if he could stop the world from collapsing. My youngest daughter sobbed, burying her face in Milan's chest, trying to escape a nightmare that was all too real. But my wife, Milan, even with tears streaming down her face, there was a strength in her eyes. It wasn't human courage, it was faith. It was the kind of steadfastness that defies the impossible. She couldn't speak, she couldn't come near, she couldn't touch me. But her lips moved, forming silent words. I recognized each one. "Lord, be with us. Lord, strengthen him. Lord, protect us." I took a deep breath, or as deep as the ropes would allow. My chest was burning, my arms were throbbing, my legs were trembling, but my soul was steadfast. I closed my eyes for a moment and said the only prayer I could. "Father, don't let this moment destroy them. Guard their hearts. Don't let this image steal their hope. If my life is taken here, take my family closer to you, not further away." When I opened my eyes again, the scene seemed suspended in time. The guards moved away. The drivers put their hands on the ignitions. The officer raised the megaphone. "This is the fate," he said, "of those who insist on disobeying the party." The engines roared simultaneous, a deep, menacing sound, like trapped beasts about to pounce. The ropes in my hands stretched first. I felt the tug tearing my skin. The chains on their ankles vibrated, the metal pressing against their bone. The whole world seemed to narrow down to a single point. I was lying on the gravel between two pickup trucks pointing in opposite directions. My family, witnessing helplessly. The gray sky above, silent, and the growing sound of the engine, awaiting only the final order. My breath became short. My heart was beating so hard, I could feel the blood pulsing in my ear. And yet, inside, there was a profound peace. Because I knew, I really knew, that my life wasn't in their hands. I was in the hands of the one who had found me in that cold cell, in that silent dawn, in that endless agony, and had said, "I'm with you until the end." The officer raised his hand. The drivers sped up. Tensions rose. The final moment was inevitable. And then, my whole body was so tense it felt like it was about to break even before the engine started. Every muscle vibrated like a rope about to snap. My joints burned, my arms tingled, and even breathing was a challenge. The officer took a few slow steps around me, like someone conducting an inspection before delivering a final verdict. He bent down near my head, bringing his face close to mine. "Last chance, Xiangwei," he said in that cold voice I knew so well. "Just repeat after me. I don't believe in Jesus. The party is my only authority. That's all. One sentence, and it all ends now." If he only knew how dry my mouth was. My tongue felt like coarse sand. Every word required effort. But when I opened my mouth, I didn't need to think. I didn't need to prepare. It just left. "Jesus alone is Lord." The officer snorted contemptuously, spat beside my face, and walked away, raising his hand to give the command. The engines roared immediately. The sound seemed to fill the entire yard, vibrating in the ground, entering my bones. Dark smoke rose in a heavy jet, obscuring even the sky for a moment. I closed my eyes, not out of fear, but because I wanted the last image etched in my mind to be him, the presence of Jesus, his face, his peace. "Lord, receive my spirit." The command echoed through the courtyard. The drivers floored it. At first I felt only a sharp tug, the cables stiffening, the chains stretching until they almost sang. My body was lifted a few inches off the ground, and a deep pain shot through my shoulders and hips. It was as if every joint was being dislocated at once. Mylan screamed my name, a scream that pierced everything, including my heart. My children were crying desperately. Brothers and sisters tried to pray, but some voices came out broken by horror. Vehicles gained momentum, tensions rose, and then came the pain, raw, overwhelming, impossible to describe. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My vision began to fill with black dots. Everything was spinning, and then something totally impossible happened. The two trucks stopped, not as if braking abruptly, but as if someone had ripped their own life from the engine. They stopped, all at once, as if an invisible hand had grabbed each vehicle by the bumper. Silence. A silence so absolute, it sounded like inverted thunder. The engines were dead. They did not fail. They didn't choke. They died, as if they had never cared. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The officer ran toward the first truck, shouting orders, cursing the drivers, demanding they start them again. They tried, turning the keys repeatedly, pressing the pedals, banging on the dashboard, but the engines were completely dead. It was as if they were soulless blocks of metal, without energy, without function. I tried to open my eyes despite the burning sensation. The sky was incredibly blue, bluer than I could remember seeing it in months, and there was something there, something that seemed to move in the light. I couldn't focus, but it seemed alive, bright, impossible to ignore. Angels, I knew. Meanwhile, mechanics scurried back and forth, opening hoods, fiddling with cables, trying to figure out how two perfectly functional vehicles had simply died. I remained there, stretched out, wounded, my chest rising and falling as if each breath were a struggle. But I was alive, against all logic, against all their plans, against all human expectation. I was alive, and the crowd began to murmur. People who had come against their will to witness my death began to point, to whisper, to tremble. Some were taking steps backward. Others looked at the sky the same way I did. Something was happening there. Something bigger than us. Something greater than any human strength. And everyone knew. At first, only timid whispers were heard. almost too timid to take shape. But as the seconds passed, the voices began to multiply, to gain courage. Words in Mandarin began to echo, miracle, their God, divine protection. An invisible wind seemed to sweep through the crowd, spreading hope where before there was fear. One of the younger guards approached slowly. The astonishment on his face was evident. Not an aggressive astonishment, but the kind that arises from perceiving something greater than himself. He stopped a few steps away, and our eyes met. There were no words, but something profound happened in that instant. He knew it wasn't a coincidence. This was something bigger. The officer, on the other hand, was red with frustration. His plan for a public execution had failed spectacularly, right before everyone's eyes. It was impossible to hide, impossible to deny. "Let him go!" he shouted angrily. The guards cut the ropes and chains. As soon as I was freed, my body fell to the ground as if it were made of wet cloth. My wrists and ankles were bruised, bleeding and torn. The pain burned, but I could barely process it. They dragged me inside the compound. Before crossing the gate, I turned to look at Mylin and our children. In their eyes, even through tears and exhaustion, there was faith. A brief glance, but full of meaning, faith and trust in God. I was thrown back into the cell, unable to move. The pain was so intense that my mind sought refuge in unconsciousness. Before darkness enveloped me, I heard a voice that pierced my soul. "This is not the end. It's only the beginning." That episode became a problem for the authorities. They couldn't admit to a miracle, but they also couldn't explain it. Mechanics examined every detail of the trucks. No faults found. The engines were working normally again, without a rational explanation. 3 days later, they decided to try again. This time, in an isolated location, without witnesses. But even in the private attempt, when I was tied up again, my body still bruised, the impossible happened again. The engines revved up, and when they were about to destroy me, they stopped simultaneously. Without warning, instantaneously, silence filled the air. The officers exchanged incredulous glances. One of them shouted, accusing them of sabotage and ordering the mechanics arrested. From the ground, with all the strength I had left, I spoke. "You can't kill me, because God won't allow it. Not through my own merit, but because He is all-powerful. Try as many times as you like. The result will always be the same. You are not fighting against me. They are fighting against God, and no one wins this battle." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. The commander came towards me with such fury that I thought it would be the end right there. His fist was raised, trembling with rage. But then something inexplicable happened. His expression changed, first to confusion, then to pure fear. He froze, lowered his arms slowly, and took a step back, as if he had seen something that no one else had seen. Without saying much, he ordered me to be taken back, this time to absolute isolation. No visitors, no human contact, no light, only darkness, silence, and a clear objective, to break me from the inside. The following months were the longest of my life. I completely lost track of time. My body weakened every day. I lost weight until I felt my bones against my skin. My strength drained away like water through my fingers. But the hardest part wasn't physical. It was my mind. The enemy whispered incessantly, "It's over for you. Just die." At least it would be faster. But even there, God found a way to reach me. I would repeat, in the dark, the verses I remembered by heart. "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear?" Sometimes I would murmur hymns so weakly that only God could hear them, and, at times, an inexplicable peace would fill the cell, as if someone were silently entering and sitting beside me. It wasn't my imagination, it was Him. Meanwhile, outside, God was writing another story. The young guard, Chen Yu, the one whose gaze had met mine on the day of the miracle, began searching for answers. Somehow, he got hold of a New Testament. He read it secretly, in the early hours of the morning, and those words began to transform him. He wasn't the only one. Several guards were restless, questioning, searching. The testimony I thought had been stifled was, in fact, multiplying. Months later, in the middle of the night, the door to my cell suddenly opened. The dim light from the hallway made my eyes sting. Chen Yu entered, breathing rapidly. Sang Wei, I've made a decision, he said firmly. I've given my life to Jesus. I'm your brother now, and I believe God wants me to help you escape. I felt the tears streaming down my face, unable to stop them. In that dark place, God was saving lives. Chen Yu continued, the miracle has spread throughout the entire country. People are asking about faith everywhere. House churches are growing like never before, and your family is doing well. Your wife has been a pillar for so many others. Then he whispered a plan he had been preparing for weeks. He had observed shifts, gaps, vulnerabilities. There were sympathetic guards, possible routes, and even brothers outside waiting to help. I don't know when the opportunity will arise, but when it does, you need to be ready. God is transforming what was planned for your destruction into something much greater. Your pain is not being wasted. The opportunity came on a quiet night, without warning. Once again, the door opened. The time has come, Chen Yu said urgently. The back door will be unlocked for 10 minutes. After that, I can't guarantee anything. I could barely stand. Months without light, without movement, without contact. My body was a shadow. God told me this is the moment, he whispered. Trust him again. Chen Yu helped me put on civilian clothes, placed some money in my hand, a yellowed map, and said, there are brothers waiting for you outside. They will take you to the border. Before I could even take a first step, he pulled me into a tight hug. Thank you for not giving up. Your faith saved my life. Now let me help save yours. And then, with trembling legs and a pounding heart, I started walking down the dark hallway. It was madness. It was impossible, but it was God. And so my escape began. The first steps were torment. My legs trembled with every movement, as if carrying the weight of months of suffering. Several times I thought I would fall, that I wouldn't be able to continue. But something invisible held me up. It was as if hands I couldn't see were holding me, pushing me forward. I followed Chen Yu's instructions carefully. Turn right, go down the stairs, cross the courtyard, reach the back door. Every shadow seemed to hide a guard. Every noise made me tremble with fear. When I finally reached the half-open door, I felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. I stepped through it and breathed the fresh night air for the first time in over 6 months. The sky was full of stars, a silent spectacle that seemed to encourage me. But there was no time for contemplation. The map indicated that I needed to walk 3 kilometers to the first village, where I would meet my contact. Each meter felt like a marathon, my feet bleeding amidst the stones and hard-packed earth. I fell several times. Halfway there, my legs gave way, and I collapsed, crying in frustration. But amidst the tears, God reminded me, this is not the end. It is only the beginning. I forced myself to get up, repeatedly. When I finally caught sight of the first lights of the village, my heart nearly burst. I found the house marked with a red cloth and knocked carefully. A middle-aged woman opened the door, worried and alert. I'm from Chen Yu. I need the road to the east, I said, my voice weak. Thank God, she replied, pulling me inside quickly. Come in quickly. I'm Sister Lu. She led me to a simple but cozy room. Clean clothes, hot food, and a cot. You need to rest, she said. You can't travel anymore in this condition. I fainted right there, overcome by exhaustion, and only woke up 18 hours later. I received rice and tea. She told me she had already helped 17 people escape. I would be the 18th. I felt a deep gratitude. God was faithful. I spent 3 days recovering, and before leaving, she told me, God is taking you away from here for a reason. There are people outside of China who need to hear your story. Your journey is just beginning. The journey to the border took 2.5 weeks, a complex chain of contacts who risked everything to help me. We traveled hidden in trucks, crossed mountains at night, and hid in basements during checkpoints. The most dangerous part was the last mountainous region. My guide, Y, a converted ex-militant, knew every trail, every safe spot. 5 nights later, we reached a river that marked the border. This is the most dangerous point, Y said. You need to cross quickly and quietly. On the other side, head north. After 2 kilometers, you'll find a shop. Ask for Pastor Chen. I took a deep breath and dove in. The water was icy, and the current strong, but I managed to reach the other bank. I collapsed, soaked and shivering. I looked back. Darkness had swallowed Y. I was alone, but closer to freedom than I had ever been. I met Pastor Chen, who welcomed me warmly. His wife brought dry clothes and hot food. He explained that in 2 days, a humanitarian convoy would be crossing into Thailand, and that I would be included as a volunteer. There were organizations ready to help religious refugees. The night before my departure, Pastor Chen approached and said, "His story doesn't end with his escape. There's still much more to be told." And with that sentence, I felt that my mission was only just beginning. Before saying goodbye to Pastor Chen, he placed his hand on my shoulder and said something that I carry with me to this day. "I believe God is preparing you for something much greater. Your testimony will reach places you never imagined." The trip to Thailand was surprisingly smooth. The train was stopped once, but the fake documents passed as if they were legitimate. When we crossed the border, and I officially set foot on Thai soil, something inside me broke. For the first time in a long time, I felt hope, real hope. In Bangkok, the organization that took me in helped me apply for asylum. The process was long, 6 months inside a refugee center. But there, I already felt freer than at any other time since my imprisonment. When I finally received the news that my asylum application had been approved by a Western country, my heart filled with gratitude and also with pain. I was safe, but my family wasn't. That truth haunted me like a shadow. 4 years have passed since I escaped. 4 years since Chen Yu risked his own life for me. 4 years living in a place where I can pray, sing, and carry a Bible without fear. I should be at peace, and I am, in a sense. But I also carry a constant wound. Milan and my children remain in China. All attempts to bring them closer have been blocked. The authorities have made it clear they will use my family as a weapon whenever I open my mouth. And this is the cruelest dilemma I have ever faced. If I speak, I may put them in danger. If I remain silent, I feel that all our suffering will be for nothing. But even so, Milan managed to send me a clandestine message. "Don't stop. Tell our story. It's worth it." Her courage overwhelms me. She, who faces everything alone, still encourages me to keep going. Today, I work with an international organization that helps persecuted Christians. I share my testimony in churches, conferences, programs, and each time I see the impact, people cry, others kneel, others decide to draw closer to God again. I also help newly arrived refugees. It's as if God has transformed my trauma into a mission. He who once pulled me out of the darkness now uses me to reach out to others who are still in it. But the nights are difficult. That's when the silence weighs heavily and the longing becomes unbearable. I open old photos on my phone. My son is 12 now. He grew up without me being able to hug him. My daughter is already 9. I see their faces changing in the pictures and wonder what they would look like if I walked through the door at that exact moment. Guilt sometimes crushes me. Part of me whispers, "You should have stayed." But another part, the part sustained by God, reminds me, "Your story has a purpose." News from China arrives fragmented. Some is terrible. Pastors disappearing, churches demolished, hundreds of Christians imprisoned. But there are also reports that fill me with hope. The church continues to grow. My testimony has been circulating secretly among prayer groups. And the most incredible thing, Chen Yu now leads a small Bible study group. Why? The guide who took me to the border has already helped more than 50 people escape. And then came the news I never expected. 6 months ago, I discovered that 2 of the officers who tried to execute me had converted. One of them left his post and now attends a house church. The other, still trapped in the system, prays in secret and warns Christians when there are imminent dangers. When I found out, I started to cry. And for the first time, it wasn't pain. It was confirmation. My suffering hadn't been in vain. 2 months ago, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a letter from Maylene was telling me about the children. She said that our oldest son was starting to ask difficult questions, that sometimes he said he didn't know if God really cared. She asked for only one thing: pray for him. Don't let our son's faith die. When I read that letter, My soul trembled. My daughter, so young and already so firm in her faith, Maylee told me that she had started praying for her schoolmates and that some children, curious about that innocent courage, began asking questions about Jesus. It was as if God were saying, even from afar, you are still planting seeds through them. At the end of the letter, Maylee wrote something that made me cry for hours. Way, I'm proud of you. I know you still struggle with the guilt of leaving, but you made the right decision. Your voice, out there, is reaching places you could never reach in here. From prison, you couldn't do anything. From exile, God is using you. Our suffering is bearing eternal fruit. Don't stop. Don't be silent. Tell our story until the whole world knows it. I reread those words countless times. It was as if she were telling me, keep going. Even if it hurts, keep going. 3 weeks later, I received news that hit me like a blow to the chest. My father had died, the one who kicked me out of the house when he discovered my faith. I wasn't invited to the funeral. My family warned me that my presence wouldn't be appropriate. Then, 3 days later, my younger brother sent me a short message, but one that I still treasure to this day. In the last few days, he asked to see your photos. He said your name. He said, "Tell Way I'm sorry. I don't know if my father had a real encounter with God. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. But I cling to the hope that the same God who stopped 2 trucks may have stopped my father's hardened heart, even if it was in his last breath." Last year, I was invited to share my testimony at a huge conference with over 20,000 people. When I finished speaking, no one could say anything. The silence felt sacred, heavy, filled with something inhuman. And then, as if the Holy Spirit simply swept through the place, people began to kneel spontaneously. Some wept, others prayed. It was as if God were saying, I still perform miracles. I am still here. The senior pastor went up on stage, wiping away tears, and told me something I'll never forget. We have so many resources here, beautiful buildings, technology, total freedom to worship. But something is missing. We lack the flame that only ignites when someone is willing to lose everything for Jesus. And I understood, at that moment, the great paradox of my life. I lost almost everything, but I gained so much more. I lost my physical freedom, but I found a spiritual freedom that no one can ever take away from me. I lost the daily presence of my wife and children, but God gave me a family scattered around the world, brothers and sisters who pray for me, encourage me, and walk with me. I lost comfort, security, a planned future, but I gained purpose, a purpose that wakes me up every morning. If I could speak to every Christian living in freedom, I would say, do not treat what you have as something commonplace. The freedom to worship is a treasure. Use that treasure. Do not let it rust while your brothers and sisters elsewhere face imprisonment and death for what you can proclaim aloud. And I would also say, true faith is only revealed when it costs something. It's easy to say, Jesus is Lord when everything is going well. But when those words mean losing everything, that's when you discover how real your faith is. If you're listening to this, don't keep it to yourself. Stories like mine aren't about me, they're about Him. There are people who need to hear that God still works miracles. There are believers on the verge of giving up who need to get up again. If you can, share where you're from. Tell what God has done in your life. Pray for persecuted Christians. And if you haven't yet given your life to Jesus, think about the cost. Yes, but also think about the reward. He is worth everything. When I remember that courtyard, the roaring engines, the ropes tearing my skin, I'm still shaken. Not by what I did, because I did nothing. I was defenseless, weak, trapped. But God, those 2 words change everything. I was condemned to death. But God, I had other plans. I was caught between 2 vehicles ready to tear me apart. But God, He placed His hands between me and the impossible. I was in the darkness of a prison, but God, He sat with me every night. I was separated from my family, but God, it gave me a new family in every country I passed through. And then I learned one of the deepest secrets of faith. When all you have is God, then you discover that God is everything. God doesn't always deliver us from suffering, but He never abandons us. I have suffered in ways no one could imagine. But even in pain, I felt His constant presence. He doesn't always rescue us the instant we desire, but He always fulfills His promises at the perfect time. He doesn't always explain the reason for suffering, but He always proves to us that He is enough. The ropes that bound me that day were real. The pain was real. The threat was real. But more real than all of that was God. More powerful than 2 military trucks was the God who created the universe with a word. Today, looking at my life, I see how He used every piece of my story. My family's rejection taught me to depend completely on God. Lou's betrayal taught me compassion. The months of isolation taught me that God is enough. Exile taught me that my true home is not in any earthly nation. Perhaps your battle is different. A persistent illness, a suffocating depression, a marriage in crisis, an addiction that seems impossible to overcome, or emotional pain that seems endless. But I want you to know, the same God who stopped those engines is still active today. He can intervene in your life, perhaps not in the way you expect, but He will never abandon, never leave you alone. He works in all things, even the most painful, for your good and for His glory. Many people ask me, was it worth it? If I could go back in time, knowing everything I would lose, would I make the same decision to follow Jesus? My answer is always the same. 1,000 times yes, 1,000,000 times, because Jesus is not a religion. He is a real person with whom I have a real relation. And when you find someone like that, when you experience such deep love, when you see the power of God working in your life in the darkest moments, nothing in this world compares. I have lost comfort. I have lost security. I have lost my family. But never, not for a second, have I lost Jesus. He has been with me every step of the way, in every tear, in every prayer whispered in the dark. I walk through the cold cell, through the execution yard, through the desperate escape, through the lonely exile, and I can testify with absolute certainty, He is worth more than all of that combined. If you are struggling with the decision to surrender your life completely to Jesus, know this: it will come at a price. It will cost you comfort, relationship, perhaps much more than you imagine. But it will also give you much more than you imagine. It will give you purpose, peace, power, divine presence, and above all, eternal life. The exchange is unfair, incredibly unequal in your favor. The persecuted church has much to teach the free church. We learn to value truly matters. We don't have impressive buildings, but we have a genuine community. We don't have elaborate programs, but we have the power of the Holy Spirit. We don't have public freedom, but our worship is full of passion. We learn that the church is not a building, it is a people. It doesn't depend on technology or comfort. The church depends on the presence of God and on hearts willing to follow Him no matter the cost. And if you decide to follow Him, know this: He will be enough, always. We learn firsthand the value of the Word. When possessing a Bible can lead you to a dark cell, each page becomes precious. You don't just read, you keep it in your heart, like someone hiding treasure. Each verse becomes nourishment for a weary soul. And prayer, prayer ceases to be a habit and becomes survival. When everything and everyone can be used against you, the only anchor is to speak to God without ceasing. It's like breathing. If you stop, you die. It was in this place of extreme weakness that I discovered something powerful. The gospel is worth any sacrifice. It is not merely a set of truths to believe. It is life. It is strength. It is transformation. It is a treasure that makes everything else pale in comparison. These lessons are not learned in classrooms. They are forged in the fire of suffering. As I write, my prayer is simple: that my story will not be just another exciting account that you hear and then forget, that it will stir something within you, that it will change the way you view your faith when faced with the choice between the easy and the right. Remember, God honors those who honor Him. When your faith hangs by a thread, He will be with you in the fire. When everything seems to scream that He has abandoned you, know that He never abandons His children. The ropes that tried to tear me apart didn't take me out of God's hands, and nothing can tear you from them either. Romans 8 clearly states, nothing, neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, neither height nor depth. Nothing in all creation can separate us from the love of God. This is my story. This is my hope. This is the God who rescued me, and He can be yours too. If after reading all this you feel something in your heart, a desire to know this Jesus who stops engines, opens doors, and transforms lives, I want to guide you in a prayer. Don't worry about the words. What matters is the sincerity of your heart. Jesus, I have heard about your love and your power. I acknowledge that I have lived far from you, trying to control my own life. Today, I choose to surrender. I believe that you died for me and rose again to give me a new life. Enter my heart. Transform me. Give me strength to follow you, no matter the cost. Teach me to live with the same passion as those who love you above all else. In your name, amen. If you prayed sincerely, I want to welcome you to the family. Now, seek a community that loves Jesus, immerse yourself in the Bible, and keep your heart always open to what God wants to do in you. And if you are already a Christian, my appeal is direct. Do not become spiritually asleep. Do not settle. There is a wounded world that needs to see the power of God. There are brothers and sisters suffering persecution who need to know that they are not alone. There is an urgent mission before Jesus returns. Share this testimony. Pray for the persecuted church. Support ministries that rescue Christian refugees. Use the freedom you have because it is a gift. And live each day remembering that everything we do for Christ is what will truly remain for eternity. Comment on where you're reading this from. Share how God has been faithful in your life. Join this global community of believers who will not be silent in the face of God's power. May the same God who stopped 2 trucks to preserve my life be the one who guides, protects, and powerfully uses yours. And never forget, no rope in this world is strong enough to separate you from the love of God. Amen.